Hello listeners, it is a delight to welcome you to today's episode. The program is Agricultural Productivity and Inclusive Economic Growth. It is Armourgate Radio Communications and I remain your host, Titilola Ogunsona. We will be discussing an interesting and crucial topic today titled Food Security and Inclusive Growth. We will be exploring what food security entails from its definitions, various definitions to pillars, measurements, global statistics on this subject matter. We will be evaluating the complex relationships between food security, economic growth, and poverty reduction. And of course, we'll be looking at the role of agriculture as a driver of economic growth, job creation, and improvement of food access and availability. Economic growth could only be sustainable when all countries have food security. It thus becomes imperative for countries to have country-owned and country-driven food security strategy. In other words, what food security strategy that will work for country A might not work for country B. What will work for Nigeria might not work for Kenya. What has worked for the United States might not necessarily work for Canada. So every country would have to, devise, will have to formulate their own country, the specific country owned and driven food security strategy, within their own realities. Why is this important? You recall that the theme of the program series for the quarter is agricultural productivity and inclusive economic growth. So you're talking about growth that is sustainable, growth that is felt by every member, of a country, of a nation, every member of a particular society. And one of the requirements of achieving sustainable growth is high level of human capital development. I recall when we took one of our program series where we spoke about economic development. We mentioned that one of the measures of economic development is the HDI, that's Human Development Index. Okay, and if one of the requirements for achieving sustainable growth is high level of capital development, thus a country with high level of poverty, and chronic level of malnutrition would definitely have limited human capital development or low level of HCD, human capital development. So it's important when people do not feel well, when people are not healthy, definitely going to speak to the level of productivity in such an environment. So food security holds significant benefit for not only human health, but also a foundation for achieving sustained and inclusive growth in any economy. Why do we need to talk about food security? Why is it important? We have unforeseen circumstances that could come up, just like the COVID-19 pandemic. It highlighted the fragility of food systems and the need for building resilience. We all saw it happen, when the pandemic led to disruptions of food supply chains. We had food price spikes. We had increased poverty levels and even hunger in some economies, especially particularly the vulnerable households, really felt the effect of this pandemic. It thus becomes important to prioritize food security and build more resilient food systems that can withstand shocks. So today's episode is basically by laying the foundation on what is food security, what we mean when we talk about food security, what are the pillars of food security. Let's look at statistics around the globe on food security matters, on hunger issues, on poverty issues, and of course we also look at measurements. How do you measure food security levels? And we'll talk about food insecurity, because the absence of food security is food insecurity. Like I said, this episode is about laying the foundation. We'll see how fast we can go, but definitely as we go ahead, we'll have experts come to talk to us more about this issue extensively. So let's start with the definition of food security. What is food security? According to 1996 World Food Summit, food security can be defined as a situation when all people at all times, that all the people at all times have physical and economic access to usage and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. There are key elements here according to the 1996 World Food Summit definition. It means that you talk about food security in a nation, in a country, in a society, in a particular continent, when all the people, all citizens have access, physical access and economic access to usage and nutritious food. So it means that not only will they have access to the food is there, they must be able to afford it. So we talk about affordability, of this food, and must also meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So it's not just about eating for eating's sake, it's about eating healthily. Healthy meals, it's also very important when we talk about food security. I'm smiling because the question that probably line of people is how many people across the continent, even in developing countries, can actually, feed elderly, not just eat for consuming food intake sake, but actually looking at the calories and eating healthily. But that is the definition of food security according to 1996 World Food Summit. When we talk about food security also, is a situation when people have access to enough safe and nutritious food for normal growth and development and an active and healthy life. You see that from this definition also, there's a focus and emphasis on nutritious food for normal growth and development, and we also see the emphasis on safe. So it means that it has to be, it has to be safe for consumption. The hygiene level has to be top notch when talking about food security, and of course you see this two last components also come into play here, that it must be for an active and healthy life, because a population that is sick cannot be productive. Now that I mention what food security is, so what is food insecurity? So when you talk about food insecurity in a particular nation, is the absence of these elements. Is when all the people do not have physical and economic access to the usage and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. And so you see that's food insecurity, and food insecurity could actually be chronic. When we talk about chronic food insecurity, we also have acute food insecurity. So but it is chronic, when the situation is that we have people who are unable to consume enough food over an extended period to maintain a normal, active, and healthy life. So it is chronic when you have people who are unable, to consume food over an extended, not just it's not a short period of time, over an extended period of time, when they cannot, consume food to maintain a normal, active, and healthy life. And it is acute, when it gets to a point when it's life threatening, when the situation is life threatening. That is when they say food security is acute. So why is it important to talk about food security? Statistics have shown that by year 2050, it is expected that we'll have about 9.3 billion people in the world. So if we are saying food security is when people have access to the usage, both economic and financial access, physical, economic, financial access to the usage and consumption of nutritious food. So what will it take to feed this large amount of people, of population by year 2015? So it does become imperative to look at this issue of food security more intensely. Let's take a quick statistics on the number of people with food insecurity level around the globe. When we talk about food insecurity, we're talking about hunger. Of course, we even look at people with high level of malnutrition across the globe. And I tried to look at some various reports. According to a report I saw, 2023, we have 733 million people facing hunger. So it means that from the report in the year 2023, 733 million people faced hunger in that particular year. And according to SOFI report, this implies that 1 in 11 people globally faced hunger in the same year. And the prediction for Africa is that 1 in 5 people in Africa faced hunger in the year on the report, on that review. Okay, and also in the same year, we got this, that around 2.33 billion people globally face moderate or severe food insecurity. This is a whole lot. Also, statistics also revealed that about 3 billion people are affected by food insecurity. Also, we have an estimate of about 815 million people globally who suffer from undernutrition, and for children aged 0 to 5 years, about 3 million of them die each year as a result of this. Also, we have about 2 billion people suffer from macronutrient deficiencies. And also we're talking about food security, talking about food. The food security also includes being feeding, living an active, healthy life. And of course, when you talk about overweight or obesity, it also speaks to our intake of food. And we need to mention that about 1.9 billion adults globally are either overweight or obese. And we also have about 41 million children under 5 years of age worldwide who are either overweight or also obese. So it's not just a question of age. It's not just in adulthood we have the issue of being overweight or obese. We also have that, unfortunately, in children as well. Also, is wanted to note that according to the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World Report, SOFI, I mentioned the acronym earlier, showed that about 673 people experienced hunger in 2024. And of course, the report from World Food Program, WFP, 2025 Global Outlook estimated that about 319 million people are facing acute levels of food security in the 67 countries with the WFP, that's the World Food Program operations, where data is available. So with the statistics, you see that it's important to look at food security, the role in achieving economic growth. On today's episode, the second pillar, accessibility, that we just discussed, is important because for 2.8 billion people around the globe, a healthy diet still remains a luxury. So definitely it's a global concern for government, for policymakers across the globe, especially in developing economies, around the world. The third pillar is utilization. This speaks to how food is stored, it speaks to how food is prepared, it speaks to hygiene level of food, and it also refers to the sufficient energy and nutrient intake by individuals. It's looking at the good care and feeding culture practices. How do you prepare the food, diversity of diet, intra-household distribution of food. That's what food utilization speaks to, and this is also very important because the food could be available. Government could expand the production, distribution, storage, and you could have access. There could be, low level of income inequality. We could have economic growth in the country, which every government wants to achieve. We want it to be sustained. We want it to be inclusive growth. That's where everyone is going. so nobody is poor, and you can have all of those things. And the top pillar, if it is missing, talking about the hygiene level in food preparation, it's still going to affect individuals eating healthily for a normal, active and healthy life. So utilization, the top pillar, is not less important, is also one of the critical pillars of food security, according to the World Summit report in 2009. Okay, and the fourth but not the last, the last but not the least pillar is stability. We want to ensure stability of access to food. This is very crucial. There's the natural occurrences that we cannot avoid. We could have earthquake, the pandemic that happened, the COVID-19 pandemic. Other things could be natural occurrences could come up that we could have any control. Okay, we could have flood. That could come up. Some countries, they have earthquakes. Anything could come up that you cannot control. What you can do is to put in strategies to mitigate such occurrences. Now, if you cannot control the natural occurrences, you can evade them totally. You can eliminate them totally. What we can do is to put in measures so that you can reduce the impact of natural occurrences. Now, what now happens to the human-made occurrences? So if you cannot control the natural, you can eliminate the natural. You can only mitigate or reduce the effect of the natural occurrences, the disrupting the supply chain of food, the food systems and economy. But what about those man-made, issues and made problems, challenges that could come up? And that means the country can fight against political instability. You can mitigate against wars happening, because any war outbreak, believe me, the masses, the grass will suffer, the citizens, the vulnerable population will suffer. And it could be gender. Most times you have the female, the women suffering, the children suffering, in the event of wars. Okay, so you want to prevent that. You want to reduce the rate of unemployment, because the second pillar is accessibility, and accessibility also speaks to economic access. Can you afford to pay? So you want to ensure that the employment level is high. You want to ensure that you have low level of unemployment, because when people are unemployed, where do they get income? When they cannot even feed, they're not going to be productive. So you want to ensure that you mitigate against those factors that could spike up high level of unemployment in a country. We want to look at your business environment. When you talk about the macroeconomic issues, there are a lot of factors you want to be dwelling on. You want to reduce income inequality, the gap between the rich and the poor. And it's interesting to note that when you are looking at the food security levels, you're not going to consider just an aspect of the population, not just the rich. You're talking about the aggregation of it all. So if and that in a society, the rich do not constitute the larger part of the society. You can't even have maybe 50% or 60% of the people being rich, or 70% to a very large extent in some economies. Yet we have some countries where the gap between the rich and the poor is very low. We have countries in Europe like that. But on the average, we have a lot of capitalist economies around the globe where the gap is really high. So you want to ensure that we want to reduce the level of income disparities, okay, so that people can have access to food, because they're talking about stability of access to food. It means that it has to be stable. If I've been gainfully employed for a while, you can afford basic amenities, food items, you can be productive. But if the person runs out of job, what happens? How do you continue that? So you want to ensure stability in your macroeconomic environment. You want to ensure that the economy keeps growing. You want to ensure that you keep inflation levels low, because it's still going to disrupt the pillars of food security. So these are the 4 pillars that we have mentioned. Some scholars will give you more, but I'm dwelling on those 4 because looking at these 4 critical pillars, we also have some sub-themes under this pillar. That's the reality of it all. So if a country can look at availability, the first pillar, accessibility, the second pillar, the top pillar, utilization, and the fourth but not the least is the last pillar, but the least pillar its stability, must ensure the stability of access to food, is entrenched in a country, in a society, in an economy. We'll take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back.
Armourgate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions, and nations. We have worked with large businesses, international development organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Armourgate, our uniqueness is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, we do not leave you to the task after sourcing talent that will help the new hire settle into robust leadership development programs. We are technical experts in advising and supporting institutions on strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact@thearmourgate.org or call +234 810 999 6666, +234 807 957 4151, and +161 0504 6026. www.thearmourgate.org. Armourgate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.
Thank you for staying tuned. We are back from the quick commercial break. If you're just joining us, the program is Agricultural Productivity and Inclusive Economic Growth. Today we are discussing food security and inclusive growth. And the last couple of minutes, we'll be looking at what food security is. You've taken global statistics on food security issues across the globe, inclusive of hunger, rates across the globe, and malnutrition levels around the world. So it's obvious from what we said that you can be serious as a nation to discuss sustainable growth, to talk about inclusive growth, if we have not settled the issue of food availability, healthy living for citizens, and that would have to do with how resilient the food systems are in such a nation. So we'll move on to talk about the pillars of food security. According to the World Summit on Food Security in 2009, the summit defined the 4 pillars of food security, and it's important because we know that adequate strengthening of these pillars will lead to an improvement of the level of food security in a nation. There are 4 pillars according to this report, and if you look at those 4 pillars, 4 themes, policies as to be enacted, be implemented around these pillars to ensure the level of food security in the nation. And we said that the absence of availability of food to citizens, the twist, the other side of food security is food insecurity. Now we're talking about the pillars of food security, and there are 4. The first is availability. The second is access. The third is utilization. The 4th pillar is stability. I will take it again. AUS. I will say A squared US. The first pillar is availability. The second pillar is access. The third pillar is utilization, and the 4th pillar is stability. I will take it one after the other and we'll discuss what it implies. So when we talk about availability, you are looking at the physical availability of food, looking at the supply side of food in a nation. You are looking at the level of food production, the stocks level. Do you have enough to consume? Do you have enough to more than enough to consume so that you can export some? Availability can also form it divided into 2. We are looking at the production aspect and the distribution aspect. So what does it entail when we say the supply side? It goes back to, do you have land availability? Because you see that in most urban areas across, even for developing economies, you see that because of globalization, because of you have more more, we have more companies coming in. We have foreign investment that investment coming into the country. So you see that most urban areas, even some outskirts lands that have been used for farming, are now being converted to housing estates, being converted to business premises, okay, for production. So availability goes back to land availability for farming. Okay, it also speaks to the quality of the land. The quality of the land, how fertile the soil is. It speaks to that. Also speaks to the natural occurrences, disaster. We have some lands that we have erosion, washing away the fertility of the soil. We have the issue of storage. Okay, even for developing economies, we talk about healthy living. Sometimes you see that for the fruits, for the vegetables, before it gets to the end users, how many of these fruits get spoiled before it gets to the end users? And it's going to impact cost of the farmer. It's going to reduce their profitability level. So when we talk about production, availability, storage facility also matter a lot, and we see a gap. We'll find someone an expert who speak more to what the issues are, what the possible solutions could be, for policymakers to pick it up from there. Okay, and you also talk about production. You talk about how do we reduce wastage. Okay, now when you talk about distribution, it also speaks to infrastructural facilities in a nation. How do we get these items to the final consumers, or to the middlemen who would pass it on to the final consumers? And distribution also speaks to how do you maintain the freshness, for instance, of fruit, of vegetables, to ensure optimal nutritional value. It's important keeping the freshness. So when we talk about availability as one of the pillars of food security, he is talking about the whole spectrum of it all, not just from land availability of land, the quality of the soil, to ensure that the fertility of the soil is preserved, the quality of the soil, the land is preserved, to storage, to finding in mechanisms that reduce wastage, and of course to distribution to the end users, or the middlemen that will pass it on to the end users, in order to maintain the freshness of perishable items like the fruits, like vegetables, like I mentioned earlier. So availability is very crucial. So we say that we to ensure, you call it the pillar, is that you don't talk about accessibility to food when it's not available, in the best form, where nutritional value of the food items are kept or are actually preserved. Okay, that's the first pillar, availability, which you have spoken to. Go to the second pillar of food security, that is access or accessibility. Now you talk, and it could come in two forms. You could either have direct, access to it, that is when you grow your crops yourself, you grow your food items yourself, you rear your animals, the poultry yourself. Okay, and you have direct access to it. Do we have adequate provision in terms of knowledge base, expertise to do that, in terms of finance to maintain that, for citizens in the country? You can have that access. All the second we're talking to in terms of accessibility is economic access. Economic access. That is, if you're not going into yourself, do you have the ability to pay, or buy the food items, which is very important. Because when we talk about the second pillar is that there could be availability of food items. Yes, it's available at national level, okay, in terms of what the economy is producing at the macro level. Agree on everybody has produced and is available to be sold. But the second is available, but do the vulnerable population have access to it? Inclusive growth is looking at bridging the gap between the rich and the poor, is reducing the poor among us, is ensuring that everyone in a society, a member of a society, can afford the basic needs of food, shelter, clothing. And food is most important, and not just eating what you see, but eating for a healthy and active life. So ability to be able to pay to buy the food items to maintain a healthy lifestyle is important, and research has also shown what I've seen is that income and education level play a major role. Okay, because it's going to determine how much can be bought. It's going to determine the quantity that can be bought. What you earn is going to determine what you can buy. The educational level sometimes, from research has shown that the more educated you are in some climate, would have higher level of income, or even the more skilled that you have, the kind of skills that you have, in the workspace will determine your ability to earn more. So, and this will determine how much can be bought, if not just how much can be bought, the type of food that can be bought, the nutritional value, the nutritional value. Can talk about balanced diet, it speaks to that. And also realize that how is it going to be shared. You see discrepancies, between what the rich will buy, the middle class will buy, and what the vulnerable groups will buy, even the discrepancy between the gender factor in a society. So you want to look at these issues as a nation, that your people have access to it, is that direct access when they can grow, and also a combination of both where they have economic access, where they can afford to buy to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Wow, this is all we can take on today's episode. I wish we could go on and on, but we have to draw the curtain here. We couldn't get to the measurement of food security and other issues. I told you this is the foundation of the subject matter. Food security's role in achieving inclusive growth in a nation, in an economy. So this is all we can take. Remember to join us next week, next Friday, same time, 5 p.m. WAT, and to learn more about Armourgate, what we do, who our clientele base are, what our services include. Please remember to check our website, www.thearmourgate.org. I'll take it again. It's www.thearmourgate.org. And my other colleagues have beautiful, interesting, intriguing programs that run from Monday to Thursday, still 5 p.m. WAT. And before I draw the curtain, I would love to leave us with the quote by Phil Adin, which says, sustainable energy plus food security plus healthy environment would give us full employment and better future in any nation, in any economy, or a given society. Yes, if you have questions, feedback, for us, the mail still remains the same. It's contact@thearmourgate.org. Till I find my way to your devices again next Friday, 5 p.m. WAT. I wish you a fruitful weekend, and I say bye from me. I remain Titilola Ogunsona.